Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Mangboy Digital Kooky, and today we're diving deep into one of the hottest topics shaking up the global economy in April 2025. The escalating trade war sparked by President Donald Trump's reciprocal tariffs, with a spotlight on the US-China showdown. We'll unpack the drama up to April 11th, how other countries are reacting, the ripple effects, Europe's planned visit to China for a trade deal, and whether this could reshape global alliances. Plus, I'll share my take on whether this is good or bad, and who might come out on top. Grab a coffee, settle in, because this is going to be a wild ride. Let's get started. First, let's set the stage. Since Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, he's been doubling down on his America First trade policy, and tariffs are his weapon of choice. On April 2nd, he dropped a bombshell: a 10% baseline tariff on all U.S. imports starting April 5th, plus so-called reciprocal tariffs targeting 60 countries, effective April 9th. These reciprocal tariffs are based on the idea that if a country slaps high tariffs on U.S. goods, the U.S. will hit back with equal or higher ones. It's a tit-for-tat strategy meant to balance trade deficits, which Trump calls a national emergency. The U.S. trade deficit was $918 billion in 2024, with China alone accounting for $295 billion of that. Trump's argument? Decades of unfair trade have gutted American jobs, and it's time to fight back. But the real fireworks are with China. Trump imposed a 34% reciprocal tariff on Chinese imports on top of an existing 20%, bringing the total to 54% as of April 9th. Then, in a stunning move on April 9th, he jacked it up to 125%, singling out China while pausing reciprocal tariffs on other countries for 90 days. Why? The White House says China's retaliation, more on that in a sec, makes them a bad actor. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claims this is about forcing fair trade, but critics argue it's a high-stakes gamble that could tank the global economy. China didn't sit quietly. On April 4th, Beijing announced a 34% tariff on all U.S. goods starting April 10th, later upping it to 84%. They've also slapped export controls on rare earth minerals critical for tech and defense, added U.S. companies to an unreliable entity list, and launched anti-dumping probes into American products like medical equipment. China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Lin Jian, said, "We will fight to the end," signaling no backing down. Analysts like Diana Choileva from Enodo Economics argue China's less dependent on U.S. markets than before, thanks to trade diversification since 2018. For example, China's exports to the EU and Southeast Asia have surged, giving them leverage. But with U.S. consumers relying on Chinese goods, I think smartphones, laptops, toys, this could mean massive price hikes. One estimate from Rosenblatt Securities pegs the cheapest iPhone jumping from $799 to over $1,100. The effects? They're already seismic. Global stock markets tanked after the April 2nd announcement, with the Dow dropping over 1,000 points on April 4th and the Nasdaq hitting bear market territory. Economists warn of a 60% chance of a global recession by year-end, up from 40% before the tariffs. In the U.S., the Tax Foundation estimates these tariffs will act like a $1,300 tax hike per household in 2025, as companies like Target and Best Buy warn of price increases on everything from avocados to electronics. Inflation, which Trump vowed to tame, could roar back, and if other countries retaliate, spoiler they are, U.S. exporters like farmers and manufacturers could get crushed. Speaking of other countries, let's talk global response. The European Union, hit with a 20% tariff, is furious. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called it a major blow to the world economy, warning of dire consequences. The EU's prepping countermeasures like 25% tariffs on U.S. goods such as soybeans and bourbon, set to kick in mid-April if talks fail. They're also eyeing restrictions on U.S. banks and tech firms. Germany's car makers like Volkswagen are holding back U.S. shipments due to a separate 25% auto tariff. But not everyone's swinging back. Japan, facing a 24% tariff, called it a national crisis, but is seeking exemptions rather than retaliation. South Korea's acting president ordered emergency support for affected industries, while Australia's PM Anthony Albanese slammed the 10% tariff as not the act of a friend, but ruled out counter-tariffs. India, hit with 26%, is analyzing impacts but secured exemptions for pharmaceuticals, a win for their export sector. Meanwhile, smaller economies like Cambodia, slapped with a 49% tariff, are bracing for pain but lack the clout to fight back. Now, here's where it gets juicy. Europe's eyeing a visit to China to strike a trade deal. The EU's Trade Commissioner, Maros Sefcovic, was in Beijing last week, and von der Leyen spoke with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, agreeing to a July EU-China summit. Why? Trump's tariffs are pushing Europe to hedge their bets. China's playing the charm card, pitching itself as a stable partner compared to Trump's chaos, as one Chinese ministry video put it. Posts on X show sentiment shifting, with some saying the EU, Japan, and South Korea are cozying up to China economically. But it's not all rosy. The EU's wary of China flooding their markets with cheap goods. EU-China trade deficits hit €300 billion in 2024. And China's support for Russia in Ukraine is a sticking point. Still, a deeper EU-China trade tie could shift global alliances, pulling Europe away from the U.S. orbit and toward a multipolar world China's been pitching. So, will this change global alliances? It's possible. If the U.S. keeps alienating allies with tariffs, countries might band together against American unilateral bullying, as China calls it. The Guardian suggests China could gain if Europe and Asia see Beijing as a reliable alternative. But alliances won't flip overnight. Europe's security ties to the U.S. run deep, and China's own trade practices, like overcapacity, spark distrust. A Rhodium Group report warns that rising Chinese imports are already hurting European production, so any deal would need ironclad terms. Is this good or bad? It depends on your lens. For Trump's base, tariffs are a bold move to bring back manufacturing jobs and stick it to countries ripping off America. The White House claims it'll raise $2.2 trillion in revenue over a decade. But the downsides are glaring. Higher prices hit consumers hard, especially low-income households. Retaliation could cripple U.S. exports, think soybeans, whiskey, or Boeing planes, and a global recession would spare no one. I lean toward bad here. Tariffs might score political points, but they're a blunt tool that often backfires. History shows the 1930 Smoot-Hawley tariff deepened the Great Depression. Plus, Trump's flip-flops, like pausing tariffs on April 9th, create uncertainty. Businesses hate. Who wins? Nobody, really, but let's break it down. Trump's betting the U.S. can outlast others, forcing concessions. If countries lower their own tariffs, he could claim victory. But China's dug in. Xi Jinping faces no elections, so he can absorb economic pain longer than Trump, who's got midterms looming in 2026. China's global trade network gives them an edge. The U.S. imported 16% of its goods from China in 2024, while China's U.S. exports are a smaller share of their economy. Smaller nations like Vietnam or Cambodia lose big. They can't fight back. Europe might dodge the worst if they pivot to China, but they risk getting squeezed between superpowers. My take: China's resilience and Trump's erratic strategy tilt the odds slightly toward Beijing, but it's a Pyrrhic victory if global trade collapses. What's next? The 90-day tariff pause on non-China countries buys time for talks, but Trump's team, including trade hawk Peter Navarro, insists he won't back off China. The EU-China summit could yield surprises, but don't expect miracles. Trade deals take years, not months. Markets will stay volatile, and consumers should brace for sticker shock. I'll keep tracking this, so hit that subscribe button and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Are tariffs genius or madness? Who's playing this smarter, Trump or Xi? That's all for today, folks. If you found this deep dive helpful, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next one. Until then, stay curious and keep questioning the narrative. Peace out. Until then, stay curious and keep questioning the narrative. Peace out.